I'm so excited to be here. Thank you, Nikki, for introducing me and bringing me to help out throughout the conference and starting this panel off right. We've got a great group of panelists, so I'll go right ahead and introduce everybody. First of all, my name's Cassie. I'm live from Brooklyn. I'm from the Bronx. I was a fellow Emma Bowen. And so let me start introducing our panelists. All right, starting with Diana Fusco. She is the Division Vice President at Spectrum Reach. We also have Sheereen Russell, Group Vice President of Ad Sales and Partner Solutions for Inclusion Audiences at OWN. We have Andy Sriubas, Chief, did I say that right? Sorry, Andy.
Close enough.
Okay, he's the COO at OUTFRONT. And then we have Malachy Williams, Ad Sales Promotions Producer at Fox Television Station. So thank you all for joining. This is a great opportunity. I'm so thrilled to be here and fortunate to be surrounded by you all and also everybody who is watching. I'm thrilled to get this started. And so with that, I will just kick it off. And I know we've got a great group of panelists here, and they've had many years of experience in the industry. And so, as you know, the path to success isn't always linear. And so I just want to know from each of you what your journey was like to get to where you are today. And if you could just give us some insight into, how you started and where you are today, would be fantastic. So Diana, if you want to start. Oh, you're muted.
There we go. All right. I wish I had Nikki's energy. My goodness. I did back in the day, I promise you. I started in local ad sales in Los Angeles and, through a couple of moves and different lines of business. I worked in national as well as local, broadcast television, worked for an independent network. I wove my way back to the cable industry, and we don't call ourselves that anymore, but found my way back and had an opportunity to launch a business for them, and I've been here ever since. So yeah, you're absolutely right. It is not linear at all. Makes it more fun.
Sheereen, do you want to kick it off next?
Absolutely. So I am what we like to call a grit girl raised in the South, born and raised in North Carolina, and migrated to New York immediately after college. I did 4 years undergrad at Wake Forest and started off on a trajectory where I majored in communication with a minor in journalism, but had no clue what I wanted to do, just that I was fascinated with all things pop culture, all things entertainment, and desperately wanted to live like Sarah Jessica Parker from Sex and the City and wanted to have all those Manolos and all those things in New York. And I thought that would be my life, which it was so very not. But instead, I started off at Time Magazine in PR, then migrated over to Sports Illustrated and started a career in marketing that then led to a career in ad sales. And then I was recruited to join MTV circa 2010 and spent nearly 10 years there. 2006 rather, spent nearly 10 years there in ad sales and business, new business, and working on some of our smaller properties connected to the network rather. And then about 5 years ago, I was recruited from the Discovery team to come over and work on OWN, and specifically to support ad sales, but partnerships around inclusion audiences and specifically reaching Black women and women of color in unique ways. And so that's what I've been doing for the last 5 years, and I absolutely love it.
Malachy.
Hi there, how are you? So my journey started at Fox 5 and My 9, where I am currently working. I came out of college, and I did have a major in English, but a minor in communications, and I did a couple of internships. But when I got to Fox, I joined what is called the trainee program. And that was, I don't want to say the year, but I'll go ahead and say it. It was 1990. And I started in the trainee program, and I progressed at the station. And as I progressed, I went from several departments. So my move was within the station, and I was a prompter for a little while for the 10 o'clock news. That's when Corey and Mahalik and Roland were on the set at 10 o'clock news. So I scored prompter. Then I went over into the creative business and community affairs department, where I became an associate producer. And eventually I moved up to, and I'm saying up because I'm thinking of the stairs, but I went from the first floor to the third floor. And I went to Good Day New York. And at Good Day New York, I was doing a lot of the sales, not sales, but the promotions producing for the show, and eventually became a segment producer. Then I left the state for a while. In 1999, I went and pursued a second master's degree. And I moved to Texas, but I worked for a little while at the station in Texas as a segment producer. And then when I came back into New York, I got a call from the person who was at the time the director of sales, and she was like, "Can you come in? I got a job for you." Because, you know, the way that we do it at the station is that it becomes family, right? So your family knows you, and they kind of trek with you along the way. So when I went off to grad school and got a second master's, my friends were still there, and the director of sales was still a friend of mine. And she said, "I got a job. Can you come in and do it?" And I thought, oh, I don't know, because I'm a segment producer, right? But I took it, and I have been at that job since 2005. So talk a little bit about that. But it is a marketing, it's a sales, promotions, marketing job, and it was sort of the best of all of my worlds all in one place. So that's how I got started.
That's incredible. Last but not least, Andy.
Hey guys, thank you for having me. First of all, this is fantastic. So I started in a little bit more of a different role. So I started in banking before everyone else on this page, I'm sure. So I'm a little older, but I did about 25 years as a banker. I covered the TMT sector, so telecom, media, and telecommunication, and technology rather. And after about 25 years, I decided that I wanted to join the industry that I was covering because I enjoyed it so much. Many of my clients have become friends. Many of my clients, we did deep dives into businesses they should acquire. How should they fund them? What were they going to do to develop new product? And so I started at a company called LodgeNet, which was a business we sold. If you've been in a hotel and you've watched television, that's the company. They have movies and the rest. We started that. We sold that to a private equity fund on the West Coast, and I joined that for a couple years, changing the philosophy of what that business was. And then I got a phone call to help a business spin out of CBS Corporation. So CBS Corporation was spinning its out-of-home business out into a company, and got to join a great team of folks there and turn it into a modern digital equivalent of itself, since it was a more of a traditional media business. And as television and radio and out of home and newspapers and magazines all have to start catching up with the Googles and the Facebooks of the world as they sell advertising, we had to do the same thing. And so a digital transformation has been underway, and I've been there about 7 years, and we're making a lot of progress, and it's been very exciting to be with the team.
Wonderful. Yeah, it all sounds like you all started not in ad sales, but somehow made your way there. And, you know, I have a similar story, but I love that you guys have navigated your way to success to where you are today. And I'm curious, there's got to be some memorable highlights throughout your career. I guess, let's say, you know, whatever impacted you the most. If you could just share a highlight that made you stand out from the crowd. The landscape right now is so competitive, and I know as the interns graduate and they're looking for jobs, they're looking for ways to really stand out. And so if you could share just, you know, one or two moments that maybe you went outside, above and beyond of your current position, that helped you get to where you are, or any accolades that you had received because of what you did, would be really helpful. And Sheereen, if you want to start this, please go ahead.
Thanks, Cassie. Great question. Lots of different moments, but I really think what is probably going to stand out for me is more recent. And it really developed when I arrived at OWN about 5 years ago. And I think the major change, and that I had a and have been fortunate to have a successful career and tenure in the space of ad sales. And I knew that I was always unique, and that oftentimes I would enter rooms and wouldn't see folks who look like me, calling upon major blue chip advertisers, CMOs, and always coming in the room more often than not looking different than the rest of the folks around the table. And then I arrived at OWN and something very magical happened. And it's something that I wish I had learned at the very tip and top of my career, that being your most authentic, 100% sure self as you are, nuanced and from where you grew up, nuanced in the culture that makes you who you are, dripping in all the things that are part of your unique genius and brilliance, and bringing that fully, wholeheartedly to the table was not something I felt comfortable doing. In fact, I often would assimilate and acquiesce to the room for the purposes of trying to fit in so that I was not disruptive, never recognizing that my uniqueness could be a factor of great disruption for the purposes of good and for the purposes of yielding more opportunity. And when I finally got to OWN, as I say to some other folks, I finally officially came out fully as myself, fully as a woman of color, fully comfortable standing in my truth and trading on that currency for the purposes of helping clients, marketers, and even our network programming team understand how to connect with people who look like me, who think like me, but also have a bunch of other unique traits, but where I could really lean into unique insights. And my career trajectory has changed dramatically in 5 years. And of course, I work for a major brand and an iconic brand with Miss Oprah Winfrey and OWN. And so leaning into the space of how could I be true? How could I show up with the right representation? And that right representation meant being me has been the major game changer for me, Cassie. And so for everyone listening, what I would simply say is who you are, from where you come. Cassie mentioned that she's originally from the Bronx and rocking from Brooklyn right now. Celebrate all those things with joy, with, I tried to hide my Southern accent being from North Carolina. In hindsight now, I wish I had not. I wish I had just believed that I was enough. And in fact, not enough, just even more than enough. So my best advice is really when you can lean into your authentic self, trust that you have a genius and a brilliance, because we all do, and bring that wholeheartedly to the table, to the discussion, to the room, to the conversation, to the interview, to the client interface. You will see how magically things do change because you lean in from a place of confidence, you lean in from what you know, and more importantly, you just lead with from a place of magic, in my opinion.
Can I jump in behind that, Cassie?
Yes, please.
Oh my goodness. That spoke to me, Sheereen, that spoke to me because I am all about leaning into your authentic self. And so I agree with that 100%. I give you a round of applause on that. And what I did fail to mention, Cassie, brought this to my memory when you said you all didn't come from an ad sales background. I actually did, because I was a trainee, right? So I was a trainee. And that program is really a 6-month program. I actually want to thank Jean Fuentes because she actually recommended me for this panel discussion today. But she was very instrumental in that 6-month program that I was in. And then after that 6 months, there are really no guarantees, but it is showing up as your authentic self. And that's what I did. As a learner, you'll probably read in my bio that I'm still a learner. I always want to learn. I always want to find out what can I know about the station and the environment that I work in. And I think that Jean picked that up from me when I was a young person. And so here's where the opportunity came. When the sales assistants went on vacation, after my 6 months, then I became the desk relief for the sales assistants. And I moved around all of those desks, and I was up there. And the woman that I told you who called me when I came back from Dallas, she was actually my boss at one time. She was the marketing manager, and she would take me out with her and all of these marketing, client marketing, sales marketing types of promotions and things that she had to do. And she would take me out. Eventually, she asked me a question. She said, Malachy, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to be a producer. And so she made it so that I was always around production. Even though I was in the sales department, I was always around production. So I do want to say, stay authentic to who you are, and also never burn bridges, because it came back around. When I came back from Dallas, she was now in the director of sales position, and she was able to call me in, and she knew my gifts. She knew the things that I had to offer. But to your point, Cassie, about standing out, now here's the thing. I didn't mention this. I went to Dallas because I got a master's in theology. I'm actually an ordained minister. So I got a master's in theology. When I came back to this station, here's what made me stand out. Eventually, the McDonald's Gospel Fest came to Fox 5. The McDonald's Gospel Fest is one of the premier gospel events in the tri-state area, really around the world. There's this whole sense of what does it mean to be a gospel artist. When that came to town, here I was sitting in the sales department, and they needed a producer. So it wasn't so much that they wanted me to produce the show because I was a minister. They wanted me to produce it because it comes out of the sales department, and McDonald's is attached to it. I've been producing that show and having some attachment to it since 2006. And then I became the lead producer on it for the broadcaster side. There is an event producer for it on the broadcast side. And when it came to Channel 5 and Channel 9, I'm the one who's in that position. So it is staying true to yourself. It is never burning a bridge, and it's using all of your gifts. And so I'm a producer on that show. So I just really wanted to jump behind Sheereen because that really spoke to me. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, I love that story, and I love, all the advice that you guys are sharing too. And I think it also goes to, sometimes people say we're lucky, and while luck might have a little piece of that part to success, but it also sounds like being prepared and really being your true self and giving, letting the people know around you who you work with what you can offer will lend also to the luck that comes with it too. Diana and Andy, would you like to share any highlighting moments of your career?
Sure. I'll share a couple stories. One happened recently. There was a group of interns that I spoke to, and I offered during that conversation to, help any of them. I said, reach out. I'm happy to, talk to you about a career in ad sales, much like this conversation. And of 10 interns, 1 reached out. So I think, if you're that kind of a person that would pick up the phone and reach out, if you're not, you should think about it. But the other thing is that is just, I think, shows kind of a natural desire to learn, network. And I think Nikki started, and I wrote it down, your network determines your net worth. In sales, it absolutely does. So that's first. The other thing that I thought about was just about saying yes often. And many of the opportunities that I've had throughout my career were not opportunities that I was terribly comfortable going after. No one asked me, but the opportunity presented itself and I went for it. And some of those opportunities, I didn't get the job or I didn't get that sale, but I always learned something. And I always had a lot of discipline around making sure that I was stretching myself all the time. And what ended up happening, and this is my second story, I was an account executive in Cleveland, Ohio, and Time Warner at the time was launching a business in the market. And I had kind of a unique background that made me somewhat qualified, but not in a leadership, as far as my leadership level. And they were desperately trying to find somebody to start this business. And I was referred by somebody who turned the job down. And I was referred because I was a fierce competitor to this station. And they thought they were getting me off the street competing against them. Instead, they put me in the driver's seat of launching a new business. So I'm pretty proud of that. But all of those opportunities along the way, get uncomfortable. If you're uncomfortable, you're stretching and you're growing and you're learning, and say yes a lot.
Wow, you guys, it's hard to follow those conversations. You guys are fantastic. It's a couple of things. One, I think what they're all saying is always be curious, always ask the extra question, always jump in and say, hey, I don't know. It is okay to say I don't know, no matter what level you're at. Anyone who hurts themselves. Number two, be tenacious, chase the dream. Like you said, always say yes. Learn as much as you can, because if you're curious and you satisfy that curiosity, you're building a foundation upon which you can drive a career. And you may not know, starting out where you are, where you're going to end up. And adding those building blocks over time creates opportunity that you may never have thought of at the beginning, because you don't have the experience to be able to do that at the beginning. Spectacular. I switched from industry job, and I could not have been happier to do so. But banking created a foundation so that I understand a lot of things that the folks that I work with today don't yet know, and the things that they knew I didn't know. And so we're constantly learning from each other. And there's no team that is so complete that it can't benefit from another opinion, another set of experience. Always remember that if you're in the room and you're feeling somewhat shy about asking a question or volunteering an opinion, it is okay. Do it, because you'll be better for it and the team will be better for it.
Definitely, yeah. And on that sentiment of having, your voice being heard, we're in a world today where diversity and inclusion is so important to make sure that all these voices are heard and taken into account. And so I'm curious, Malachy, if you can begin, has there ever been a moment in your career where you felt like your voice wasn't heard? And if you could just walk us through if you have had that moment and how you overcame it.
Well, I think it's sort of life. Sometimes you feel as though you may not be heard. I have had those situations, and it still sometimes occurs, but we overcome it because we're a team, right? So I have good relationships with those people that I work with. And if that happens, then we sit down and we talk about it. So I mentioned earlier that we're a family. So and particularly at Fox, on the side, I don't know a whole lot about the network. I will say though that for diversity and inclusion, I did into the network, and I became a co-chair of a women's ERG, which was helpful also in that. But we overcome because we're able to have good conversations with people and say, hey, I really feel like you heard me in that. And because we have those types of relationships and we can sit down and we can say that, I think that it's fair. So it hasn't been a huge setback. That's just not how I live my life. I live my life in a way that if something rubs me the wrong way, I'll try to bring it to someone's attention and move forward with it. I try to do that across all platforms that I find myself in. So, but being the head of a female ERG, so it's Women at Fox. I was on that board for maybe 5 years. I became the leader of it for 3 years. And on that board, we were able to help women to have those different platforms, to have speakers and to have events and bring our voices forward in a way that were heard. So I've not really had a huge setback, but it's life, it happens, but we have conversations about it. We're in the communications business. Unfortunately, sometimes in the communications business, we don't communicate all that well with each other, but we are in the communications business, and it's just best to say, hey, that, we could do a little better on that. So that's really what I have to offer on that.
Diana or Sheereen, do you want to shed some light?
I would just add, particularly, in leadership roles, I actually had something happen not too long ago in a very public setting. And he didn't plan for it. So I in the moment, respectfully asked this person not to do what they did. And shortly afterwards, I received some emails and text messages and from other women thanking me for speaking up. So what I would say is that, we all have a responsibility. And, I think it's not always, I think people mean well. And I always come from a place of believing that other individual meant well. So if you come from a good place and you're able to bring that up in the moment, you may help somebody else and give them permission to also do the same. But we all have a responsibility.
Cassie, I would just compliment that and simply say, part of it again leans in from my first place of just being a truth teller as part of the authenticity, and to the point that Diana just mentioned. When you acknowledge that something is not aligned with how you believe, feel, or also just from a point of real data or insights, it's imperative that you come from a place of respectful truth telling. And most recently, we had a presentation that was going out to the marketplace. And I watched and I was becoming a little bit agitated because for me, I was like, we've gone through 17 slides in this deck and I've yet to see a person of color. And what that is demonstrating to the marketplace is that as we celebrate our greatest global talent, we aren't even mindful of inclusion and how incredibly critical it is that everyone sees himself represented. And even if the audience isn't part of that inclusion audience or that subset, we must be intentional. And so I respectfully and kindly approach the situation from a place of, this is not how we can represent ourselves, not in 2021. And more importantly, what does it look like? And I volunteered and said, let me help you with creating the criteria associated with making sure our creative teams, when we're building assets and marketing materials, are meeting at least 5 or 10 things that it's ask yourselves these questions about our materials. And so it required me to be bold, but I was thoughtful in my delivery, but also from a place of true conviction and passion. And I think that's what you have to do, especially when it comes to feeling marginalized or feeling like your voice needs to be heard.
Thank you. Yeah, that's huge. And I'm also curious, given that you all do have ad sales backgrounds and we've all just gone through the upfront and we're talking about, being our authentic selves, but I want to dive a little bit deeper into what does that actually mean? So what steps need to be taken in a career specifically with ad sales? Because as we know, ad sales, yes, money is tied to it, but the pillars for it really are building the relationships, having those connections, and storytelling. And so if you could just share a couple of maybe even attributes or just times where you showed your authentic self or you made that connection to make that sale would be really helpful for us to hear.
I would say to that, Cassie, that even though we're all sellers and even though we're responsible for going out and creating demand for products, goods, or services, what I recognize is that I don't sell content. And while I'm definitely immersed in the storytelling, I'm really selling solutions. I'm really selling connection and engagement. And what is critical for anyone who's in ad sales is that part of relationship building means asking more questions than talking. And of course, while many sellers have to be incredibly extemporaneous, quick on their feet, and an ability to improvise on the drop of a dime, what I'm most skilled at doing is doing the research on the folks that I'm going to meet with, understanding the company, the landscape, what their goals and objectives are, and coming in and selling solutions to meet those goals. I have made the horrible mistake very early on in my career and going in and thinking, look at my toolbox, look what I have to sell, look what I have to share. And then I had to put myself in the customer seat and think of it as like if you went to the doctor because you had a stomach ache, right? And the doctor never asked you what your symptoms were or why you were even in the doctor's office and started to pitch to you that they were going to give you a medicine for migraines or headaches. You would say that has nothing to do with why I'm here or what I need. I think about that same sort of approach when it comes to all of my clients. What can I deliver for them? What do they need? What's missing? What's the delta between where their business needs to be, where's the growth opportunities, what margins are they looking for, and how do I play into that? Because as much as I'd love to go in and say, hey, I represent this awesome dope brand, we've got all these great shows from Ava DuVernay and this person and Oprah's doing this, that doesn't mean it always works or is the right solution for said client or said partner. So I become so immersed in the brands and what they need in my client and then deliver. And I actually think that's a universal trait. When you're going to go interview with someone, figure out who you're interviewing with, Google them, understand them, because that allows you to create for connection and often more intimacy from a place that makes the person feel seen and heard and appreciated, quite frankly.
That was really well said. I'll jump in real quick. I think, a couple things. There's so much I liked about what you just said, but I think the other thing is that you have to be a student of advertising too. Learn as much as you can about your clients, about those advertisers, but expertise in really any industry today is fleeting. It's constantly changing and evolving. And this quarter is going to look different than next quarter. At the end of it, make sure that you're also coming back and you've delivered on what you've promised to that advertiser. Be known for delivering on the promises that you make. And then the last thing I'll say is someone said this to me recently, that listening is the Swiss Army knife of sales. And it really is. You can learn so much about, what that client or that advertiser needs just by, being quiet and asking the right questions. So I always think about that.
I love that, Diana.
Yeah. I'm glad that you went in front of me, Diana, because you actually made me think of some other things. The student part, you always have to be a learner. So it's very important to ask the right questions. With me, the difference between my job and I think with the rest of the panel's job is that I'm not a salesperson. So I work in the sales department. I'm the only producer who sits in the sales department. A lot of people don't even realize that there's a producer who sits in the sales department. So my relationships are with the account executives. Their relationships are with their clients. And then my relationship is with the news department. My relationship is with the promotions department. My relationship is with the art department and with all of the other departments of the station to pull all of those elements together so that we can come out with a product that is sufficient for our client over and above really what they ask. So I have to make a lot of relationships. Now, when they want to take me out on a call, which they do sometimes, they'll take me out with them, but not all the time. I have to come in as a listener. And then what happens is that the salespeople, they sell me. They're like, Malachy can deliver on whatever you want. And so then I come in the room and I have to be astute enough to say, hi, and I'm here for you as well. So they have the relationships and I have to make sure that I don't damage those relationships. And then I still have to deliver and really know what the client wants as well. So it's really about forming those really trustworthy relationships across the board and being a student in every aspect. I have to know the station. I have to know I have to know what the creative services department is doing, because they are marketing the station. And what I have to do is come in on top of that and say to the client, all right, we know that you want your brand represented. Now here's something that we want you to tie into our brand as well, but then we want your brand to shine, but I don't want to damage our brand at the same time. So it's really working through all of those different layers of relationship. So I just really wanted to jump in and say that. Thank you, Diana.
Thank you all. And Andy, good to have you back. If you want to jump in here, what we're talking about is just the importance of relationship building, connection, and storytelling in our industry. And so if you want to talk a little bit about how that impacts your current role and what you've done in your career would be great.
Sure, no problem. I apologize. The internet's having a little bit of problems here. I'm not on a connected line. But first, everything that you said, I've heard and believe all of it. The first, second, nobody buys anything from a salesperson. They buy something from an advisor. And so the education, the always being a learner, the ask questions and listen before you actually try to solutionize something for somebody is important. Like you are a sales engineer is what we would term that as. And when I was a banker for a long time, we had to sell. We were basically selling something. It's selling a product, whether it's going public or it's selling a merger with another company or it's selling capital raising of something. That is always an advice, a deep piece of very important advice that you're selling relative to other banks that could do a similar thing. Advertising is the same thing. And so if a client is trying to achieve a goal, a brand is trying to achieve more basket lift when people go to stores to buy things, more foot traffic into their stores, a higher price point, a new brand launch, you have to understand how that is motivating a client to do something. And then what tools do you bring as an out-of-home company, as a television company, as a company to enhance their opportunity to advance their goal, right? What are their KPIs? What are their key performance indicators that they're looking for and looking to achieve? And then what do you bring to the table to be able to help that? And it is largely a consultative business. If you were just walking in trying to sell widgets, that's a different story. Then it's really about price only. But if you're doing something that's value added, you're going to have to know that client inside and out and be part of their team or be perceived to be part of their team. And that's how the best salespeople do well at their job.
And then just to piggyback off that, Andy, can you then describe how you've transitioned 25 years of being a banker into your current role now? And what was that like? What skills did you have to bring over? Because I'm sure the skills that you've had as a banker could lend to what you're doing.
Well, they do, and actually, it's interesting. The skills as a banker, when you're trying to sell a sophisticated product, something that requires months and months of a sales schedule, a sales philosophy that you have to bring forward, and you have to understand what the client wants, and so you can structure a solution that is tailored to that particular environment, which is what you do as a banker. The same thing happens in the digital environment. As I was mentioning, to the extent that a brand wants to build its foot traffic, well, how do we help bring people into the store? That's important. It's not just about throwing a brand up and putting a nice slogan on it. All of that is important. But what's the holistic strategy to delivering against that KPI? And that philosophy has changed a lot. It used to be in traditional media where, hey, we're the television company, come buy a spot. And then really all the pressure's on the agency or on the brand themselves. But as a salesperson within a media entity, you have to showcase your stuff and why your stuff is either complementary to what other things are being bought in the marketplace and or better than. Because it is likely in advertising that brand isn't buying just one type of media. They've got a media plan, and the plan includes television and digital and hopefully out of home and a few other things. How to work together? How much money do you allocate in a plan to each of those as your marketing strategy grows? And how do you show a return on that investment? And an advertising campaign is an investment in your business. And to the extent that you're making that investment, how do you spending it on, in our case, and at home, provide value back to you when you're trying to put people in stores to buy things. And so if you put that mindset on, which is I'm your advisor, I'm your helper, and I'm going to figure out what tools I have that I can bring to the table, that's the right mindset to approach every conversation. And you cannot be successful, to echo everyone here that said this, you can't be successful unless you know what they want, unless you listen and ask questions and know what it is. If you're selling all the time, you're not going to be successful. You have to be part of an advisory group.
Thank you all. This has been fantastic. And actually a question that had been brought up, even just to add to that, because you guys have been giving such great advice, is how can they stand out in an interview? So less about listening, and yes, they can listen in an interview, but then how can they speak to, I guess, the position, especially going into maybe an ad sales career, but how could they really set themselves apart from other candidates in an interview?
I'll jump in. I think it's actually really foundational to sales. Do your homework. Know who you're interviewing with. Try to tap into their network or look for folks that may know them. Be prepared. There's no substitute for preparation. Know the company. Just go in prepared.
Preparation is key. Malachy, do you want to share? Or Andy?
Well, I agree with Diana in that.
Go ahead,
My thoughts really were going to after you get the interview and after you get the job, then you still have to do that. So once you're at your new position, you always ask questions. You be the one who shows up in the office with your pad and pencil when someone calls you into the room. Don't just walk in and say, yeah, I'm here. You always come, and this is what I tell the young people when they come into our department. A lot of them stop into my office all the time because they just want advice on how to get to the next level. But it's always show up with your pad and your paper and you ask questions. And then the one thing that I will say that I do for everyone who comes through the door is I always take them on a tour of the station. And that goes with understanding that you don't just get through the lobby, press the floor that you go into, and then, lunchtime, you press L and you go back. And at the end of the day, you do the same thing. You have to know your entire environment. So I take them on a tour of the entire station and I let them know this is that department. This is what happens in that department. That goes with doing your homework and knowing your environment. So even before you get there, as much homework as you need to do to get the job. And then once you get the job, you still do that work and you still understand what happens and what makes this whole television, what makes this operation run. So it's an ongoing learning process throughout your entire career. I never stop learning. I'm still learning. I was just in an edit session before I logged on here, and I'll go back into my edit session when I leave. And in those collaborative moments, even with your editor, you're constantly learning and finding new ways. So it's an ongoing learning process.
I would say to complement that too.
I'll tag onto that to say two things. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Andy.
I was just going to say two things to add on to that. One is the biggest mistake you can make is to walk into a room assuming you know the answer. You may know the answer, but you also may not. And when new facts are brought to the table, you may want to change and pivot. And so to the extent that you're very stuck, I've made this mistake too many times to count, but you walk in thinking I figured it out. And the answer is going to be 27. Well, you learn a little bit in the room and the answer is not going to be 27. So you have to pivot and move and adapt. And that is a sign of a very seasoned salesperson when they can do that. And if you walk in thinking that you, like you said, if you walk in thinking that you've got all the answers or that you're ready for the next level, then act like it. And act as if you're a little bit more mature and take that extra step and ask the question and bring things to a conclusion as opposed to trying to force your point on the situation all of the time. I think people who get promoted are the ones who are already in the job. They're acting as if they're in the job, not in any arrogant sense, but taking on additional responsibility without having to say, well, promote me or pay me more money or whatever the thing is. Get in the job, do the work, and so that it's an obvious promotion or it's an obvious next level to all of the folks around the room that you deserve that opportunity. And that's a bit of learning. That's a bit of taking one thing at a time and absorbing things as you take in additional information that you may not have at the beginning.
And I would say in this virtual world where a lot of you are probably planning to graduate and looking to meet with executives at companies, and you're looking and thinking, how do I stand out? Alongside everything that, the other panelists have said, I think it's so critical to have really strong follow-up. And I'm very old school in that way. And I still do send snail mail in certain instances because it's just sort of the learnings that I got. But it is also just about your timeliness. It's about being very direct. And if you want the job, you want the opportunity, say that too, and affirm why you're the right candidate and the right person for it. It's a unique climate, but we all just talked about how Nikki just was so vivacious and had us all engaged earlier. How are you going to bring your spirited self with, of course, the context of whatever necessary professionalism is required for said industry and all of those things. But stand out really leans again from that place of being anchored in who you are and feeling confident to show up as your authentic self, but also ask for the opportunity and let them know that you want the opportunity and what you will bring to the table. And that being agile, as Andy just said, is so critical. And I also think when you're asked questions that you don't know the answer to, be very transparent about, I don't know the answer to that, but you've given me something that I've got to go back and figure out. And I'm going to come back to you on that because I do want to give you a thoughtful answer. And I want to be really mindful of how I respond, because we respect that just as much as the correct answer. And for sure, more than someone who pretends to have the answer and does not.
Can I jump in on that and just give one last comment? A please and a thank you will take you a long way too. I'm old school too, Sheereen. Please and thank you takes you a long way. And that's what makes you stand out. When you are just old school, down home, polite, and say, just show up smart, polite, please, thank you, and that's it. That's what I'm gonna say. That's a wrap.
I love that, Malachy.
That was absolutely terrific, guys. I appreciate that. That was fantastic. Please, thank you, manners, and compliment your colleagues, right? You're all smart. You wouldn't be in the room if you weren't smart. But you're there, and not everyone's the same person. Those experiences we talked about at the very beginning, everyone's bringing something to the table. That was a great point. Thank you for that. Really great discussion, guys. How great so-and-so did, or what they brought to the table. That encourages more interaction, and then everybody comes out of their shell. That team spirit drives a much better result for your team relative to everyone else competing in the market.
Yeah. All right. Now you got me. I got to jump in too, because it's got me thinking about what do you want people to say about you when you're not in the room? That's really what we're getting to. Who can speak on your behalf when you're not there? The next time a job comes up, why would somebody say that you are the right person for that position? Think about that through your day as you're working through any company. What do you want people to say about you when you're not there?
These are all incredibly impactful, and I feel like a lot of what you all are saying I'm still learning, and I've learned actually being an Emma Bowen fellow, and so I'm so thrilled that you're all speaking to it and that everybody has the opportunity to learn from you guys. Another question I have is, has there been an influence in your life who has helped guided you, or a mentor, and how important is mentorship throughout your career? And if you could talk a little bit about that. I'm actually a mentor to a couple of Emma Bowen alums, and so it means a lot to me to give back. And so I'd love to hear about what that meant, what that means for you, and if you've had mentors throughout your career.
Cassie, I would say there's two things. I think there's a mentor and there's a sponsor, and both are uniquely different. A mentor is critical. A mentor is someone who you feel comfortable being incredibly vulnerable with, asking the tough questions, helping you to navigate certain situations, enlightening you on the corporate culture. And a mentor can also be outside of your organization, but also just that person that you go to and say, how best do I navigate this? How do I set myself up? Alluding to the things that Andy talked about before, to put you already in position because you're doing that work, and who's coaching you silently and giving you access to intel and currency that helps you continue to develop and grow. And sometimes there's a peer mentor. Sometimes it's someone who you worked with, years ago or interned with. And then other times it could be someone who's actually just senior level to you in your team or group. And then there's sponsorship. And I think sponsorship is a unique point of view, because sponsorship means said person in whatever organization or whatever industry is also in position, as Diana talked about, to speak about you when you're not in the room, and to also have influence on how you get into the room and how you navigate those spaces, and puts you in places for promotion, for visibility and consideration. And the earlier that you can learn that, the better. Now, sponsors oftentimes will identify you as someone, because they also recognize that if you are tethered to their work or their performance, it only helps and benefits them, because you are delivering upon the goods and what they've seen. And I've been fortunate, I would say, in the last 5 years to really have people say, I want to help you do this, or I'm recruiting you. I want you on my team because I see what you can bring. And then they are lobbying on your behalf. And so it's great to have those people. It's great to tell those folks, here's what I'm working on, here's what I'm doing, on top of what else they can or cannot see. And I would tell you that I still have sponsors who are at other organizations who still check in with me. And those relationships are so critical because as I think about the evolution and all the disruption that's happening in the space of entertainment and storytelling and content and media, I don't know where I'll want to be a year from now or two. So to have people in places who can help navigate and open doors is always just as critical, in my opinion, as having mentors.
If I can add to that, Sheereen said is perfect. If you don't have mentors, stop what you're doing and go find them. It's that important. Sponsors love that idea as well. I think you need to have someone who's going to advocate for you when you're not in the room to make before. And I'd add a third to it, which is a group of colleagues. And they don't necessarily have to be in your business. In fact, it's probably better that they're not in your business, but folks that you've grown up with, that understand who you are, how you react to people, and to whom you can speak very openly about whatever it is that's going on in your life. Say, hey, how do I handle this situation? My boss said this. I'm uncomfortable about it. I've got a client that's trying to do something. I'm not sure how to handle it. And these could be people in other industries that you went to college with or that you've in the past, but collect a group of people and hold on to them with two hands, because they are so valuable to you over time that I still have people that for 30 years have been friends of mine that I count on constantly, and they count on me. And when the phone rings and it's one of those folks and they say, I need your help, you pick up that phone because they'll pick it up for you. I can't tell you how important it is throughout your career, because you're going to move around from job to job, maybe from industry to industry, and having those people who have a consistent view of who you are and what your sense of value is very important to your advancement and your satisfaction, because at the end of the day, you want to be happy what you're doing. Again, everyone's smart. That's not a differentiator anymore when you already got the job. It's then how do you act with people and how do you make others happy and how do you create that team that works best for the overall organization.
Yeah, and I would just add that I've had mentors my whole career, and I attribute much of my success to those people because they were there for me. So tons of gratitude for people that help us get where we want to go. I would encourage everybody to show up very prepared for mentorship calls, meetings, lunch, whatever it is that you're doing with that mentor, that meeting. Show up prepared because they're taking time to help you. I do a lot of mentoring, and it's probably the first conversation that we have typically is that make sure you bring something with you to that conversation that we need to work on, and respect their time, respect your time, and use that time as valuable, because it is very valuable in your career.
All right, so I'm going to jump right in since we only have 5 minutes left, and I do want to bring some of the interns' questions to light. And so one of them asked, Erin Burnett asked, what is the biggest or best mistake you've ever made that you've learned from in your career? So Malachy, I don't know if you want to start. Sorry, I interrupted you, but if you want to start with that answer now.
I need to think. Seriously. I'm going to pass it to someone else.
Sheereen or Andy?
My biggest mistake, I think I alluded to it before, was going into a room during my tenure at Sports Illustrated, knowing all the facts about all the things that we were doing and ill-informed on what my partners and clients needed. And I went in and I had like this one trick pony and wasn't in position to really be agile because I hadn't done the work and I hadn't done the research. And more importantly, I had so focused on my script and delivering upon my KPIs and not thinking of the partner and the brand. And so it just really demonstrated, and I was very early on in my career in sales, but it was a critical lesson to learn because the embarrassment and the shame that I felt in that moment just prepared me to always be poised and recognizing what it meant to be poised going forward, to have the agility, but more importantly, not to lead with what's most important to me and what I've got to drive, but rather, and not be just a unit seller, but rather really being around the solutions or being an advisor, to Andy's earlier point, and learning what consultative selling really looks and feels like, and then leveraging that across every single one of my relationships and interface. I would tell you that while I'm a seller, but I'm also a seller, and seller is probably not the right word, but while I build these relationships and provide solutions and I'm in advertising sales, the traits that I've learned about relationship building permeate into every realm of my life. When I'm interfacing with the teachers at my son's schools, when I'm introducing myself or meeting new people, there's a tool that I've learned, which is that everyone wants to be seen and heard. And the more that I can give said person the opportunity to tell me about themselves before leading in with me and what I want and what I need, I often develop better interpersonal relationships with said persons. And it's worked to my advantage because there's connection and interpersonal intimacy that's developed in a way that makes it more comfortable. And so that would probably be the most embarrassing mistake that I can remember right now, but the learning was critical. And I would just say every mistake happens oftentimes for the purposes of teaching us something better and how to do something different. The only other really critical thing I would also tell you is that, and I've learned this more and more, especially as my work with talent and folks in Hollywood has been increased. And Nikki may remember this story. We were together many years ago during our Time Warner tenure. And I foolishly made a comment about a celebrity or a talent, but not from judgment, but just inquiring based on what like all of the gossip magazines were saying. And I learned that the person at the table was best friends with said person and was highly offended that I would ask such a question. And from that moment on, I've always learned you never know who's at the table. You never know who's in the room. So it's always critical to be mindful of what you say and how you say it and to whom you're saying it and to whom you're referencing. And I probably was about 26 or 27 at the time. And since then, I have never made that mistake again because it was so incredibly embarrassing. And so those would be two mistakes that I would tell you that I've learned from.
Thank you.
Sheereen, those are perfect. And I'll add what's the line? You have 2 ears and 1 mouth, use them in proportion, right? I remember that constantly. And the other thing is, if you don't have anything nice to say about somebody, don't say anything at all, right? Those are real. Those aren't just, old wives' tales. Those are real. I'll tell you from a mistake standpoint, one of the things that I think makes Silicon Valley more successful than most other places in forming new businesses and creating new paradigms for the way the world's going to look in the future is because they have a philosophy that you can fail and it's okay. I have failed more times than I can count in my life, but they are learning opportunities. And to the extent that you consider the learning opportunities, you don't dwell on it. So I have loved, oh my God, that didn't work out. I pitched that thing and that didn't happen or whatever. It's okay. There's another at bat that you can get up and swing the bat again and take a shot, but you're a little smarter the next time. And Silicon Valley has done that very well. So 3 or 4 failures in a business doesn't mean the founder is out of it. That means the next business could be the best one. It's going to change the way we do something in life, and it's a $1 billion unicorn. And that's okay. And I think that underneath all of it, I think that's what the secret sauce is in Silicon Valley, and we have to get comfortable with it. It's okay to fail. If you're okay to fail, then you're a little bit more confident when you put forward an idea, when you contribute something, when you sit back and listen because you feel you have to be the one talking in the room. All of this contributes to this much better environment and having that authentic self when you step into the room, as opposed to having to put on some sort of a face mask to be able to say, well, this is who I am. I need to be perceived this way. No, that's okay, because you're probably going to adopt someone else's face mask because that's what you think people want to hear. And I don't want to hear anybody else. I want to hear you. I want to know what you're thinking. You're in the room for a reason. We've put you here. We've hired you. You're in the interview chair for a reason. Give me you, because if you're not giving me you, then I could get me from someone else. I mean, I can look in the mirror and get that, and I'm sick of me. I want you. So please bring who you are.
Well, we're sick of you, Andy. It's time. I'm just kidding. This has been a fantastic panel. I am so happy to have sat with all of you, and I wish I could meet you in person, but thank you all for providing such value to everybody and sharing your incredible stories. And I hope that, you know, this will open doors for others to reach out to you too, if they have any further questions that we couldn't get to. But thank you so much. And thank you, Nikki, for putting us all together. This has been a great panel.
Well, I'm actually glad that you all are still here because I did not realize I was muted. So we're going to do this again. Woo! Where's the money, honey? Because that's what ad sales is all about.
Oh no.
You might. Okay, see, that's what I'm talking about. Okay, you all can go back to hearing me. That was fantastic. Thank you so much. Another round of applause for Cassie and the entire panel. So here's the deal. The moral of the story is be careful how you treat people because the toes you step on today may be connected to the ass you have to kiss tomorrow, and that's real talk. So relationships are everything. Sheereen, you know I remember because I was sitting, I think, right next to you when that happened. So I appreciate you sharing. I appreciate you sharing that story. Diana, Andy, Malachy, thank you so much. We appreciate this. Be your authentic self, fellows, alums, partners. Represent fully who you are. Be okay taking a more serpentine road to get to your next opportunity. Closed mouths don't get fed. My grandmother used to remind me of that all the time. Speak up and use your presence. This is a relationship-driven business. Listening is the Swiss Army knife of sales. Do your due diligence as part of your prep work. The difference between mentorship and sponsorship, if you do not have either, you're not in the game, and that is a problem. Whoa, 2 ears and 1 mouth. That's what I'm talking about. Use them accordingly. And on that note, thank you all. Alex, you're up next.